So, joining me again for another Deck Tech on the YouTube channel here, we have Pierre as per usual. How you doing, Pierre?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I'm doing even better than usual because we also have Aaron Grace here with us after his top four from US Nats. How you doing, Aaron?
I'm doing great as well. Thank you for having me.
Cool, cool. All right, so today we're going to be talking about Enigma. Like I said, Aaron got top four in US Nats off it, and Pierre, surprisingly enough, was actually running the same 80. These two worked on it a lot together. So it was a bit of a cross-team collaboration. So run me through like what the idea behind Enigma was. Like, why did you guys decide to bring this? Because when I heard Pierre was bringing Enigma, I thought it was kind of crazy because I thought Zen would be just super bad for you, but you piloted very well and you did very well, Aaron. So what do you think?
So, I was an OG Prism player, so I already kind of had an affinity for playing these types of illusionist decks. So I was pretty excited when Enigma was announced to really work on her to see if there's something there. I wasn't hard locked on her as soon as I saw her, and even a couple weeks before the event, I was kind of considering playing something like Azalea or KO that was just a little bit more solved, into a new meta. But as I played more with Enigma and started talking about it with other people and kind of seeing some of the evolutions of what cards are good or not, I actually started to feel pretty comfortable with it. Especially seeing how popular New ended up being, and that matchup being very, very good. I think that gave a huge boon to Enigma. And with Pierre specifically, I started talking with him a week or two before the event, and he's a Prism player as well, but he wasn't feeling super comfortable with his Prism Brute matchup. Uh, but he felt like Enigma wasn't quite there yet, so we started to work on it together, and we ended up coming up with a list that I think we were both pretty happy on.
Nice. So you think that Enigma has like a pretty like solid brute matchup then? Because I know that like obviously top cut might not be super representative,
Yeah.
but that didn't go necessarily your way there.
Yeah, so I played Brute 3 times in the tournament. I played a Levia in day one, and I played the KO player twice, both on camera. One in Swiss, I won the first game, and then the rematch in the semifinals. Fortunately, it didn't go quite as well. I do think the matchup is Enigma favored. I think Brute can be blocked a lot easier than other aggro decks, and they're more prone to stumbling. And when they stumble, Enigma can really capitalize and snowball on them. And but of course, Brute always has the high roll potential. So I mean, they could always just blood rush, destroy you, and it doesn't matter anyways. But
Yeah.
they can do that with any deck.
Sure. And we can get into like more matchup specific stuff in maybe a little bit here, but let's start off with just Enigma in general. Like what is the deck trying to do? What is like the general concept behind the deck when you were building it, and like why bring Enigma over some other options, do you think?
Um, so one thing that really gravitated towards, or that I liked about Enigma's matchup spread, was when you take a look at the perceived metagame and what heroes were good and not. Basically, anything below like the top echelon of decks, Enigma just had almost free wins into. And when you're playing a tournament like Nationals that's split format, a lot of your results are dictated by how well you do in draft and how well you can kind of consistently get wins in CC as a mixture, right? And obviously that came in big for my record since I was able to go 6-0 in draft. But when you play a CC decks where the limited CC rounds are less impactful because there is such an emphasis on draft, I like bringing a deck that can just have easy matchups. So if you accidentally pair into, you know, a slower, grindy deck like a Guardian or a Warrior or, some lower tier heroes, you don't have to worry about accidentally losing. And then as long as you have a solid game plan for those heroes at the top, I actually think she ends up being a very good pick, even though she has a bit more polarizing matchups than maybe some other like consistent aggro decks do.
Sure.
Yeah,
I think that's
I,
totally fair.
to back up on that, like when Aaron and I kind of finalized the list, like we had understanding of like we were favored into everything, like B tier or below, basically. Like basically, like most of these were free. So especially like day one when there's a lot of random decks still, like that helps a lot getting free wins into those. And then like obviously we knew we were like not very favored into Zen, um, especially like good Zens. But we felt very good to Brew and like Prism and uh, the only one that we were kind of lacking was the Mirror. But I think like those you have to pick your spots, and Illusionist is very good at like shaping around the meta and like having polarized matchups, which I think you want to kind of like get free wins, like Aaron said, and you can still edge out a win into tough matchups. So I think like Illusionist in general is like never a bad pick for a split tournament.
Yeah.
It's also
No, I
it's
can see
also
that.
pretty good in like day one events like
Yeah,
this, where it's the first national season. There's not really a lot of data to support it. So when you're bringing the brand new illusionist, a lot of people don't really know the ins and outs of playing against it if they haven't practiced it, and
yeah,
especially if you don't have a list that's slightly different than what maybe they're expecting. It can really catch people off guard. So you do have that slight advantage where maybe you know what you're doing very well as the illusionist player, but your opponent doesn't, and that leaves them a lot of windows to make mistakes.
yeah, absolutely. And mistakes are very punishing against illusionists.
Oh, for sure. All right. So that's why we chose Enigma. I guess we can go ahead and start getting into the list here. So starting off with the equipment suite for the main board, at least. We have Cosmos the weapon, which I guess we can talk about that a little bit. Did you guys ever consider Iris as an option or even Refractor? I know some people were playing like some weird fatiguey sort of things, swing for 11 once a turn, or is Cosmo just the sauce?
Cosmo's really powerful.
Yeah,
Obviously you got to look at your options. I've seen some of the Cosmo ideas and some of the math behind how well it works with spectral manifestations and the idea that you're just trying to block more against really aggressive decks and not try and snowball a board where the attacking with multiple wards isn't really relevant. But like the rate on Cosmo and like some of these cards you're playing are just so high that it rivals or surpasses uh, Refractor in a lot of situations. And you also have the ability to snowball and make use of a bigger board that Refractor you could just be stuck with dead cards. And kind of a similar thing with Iris, like if you're just trying to go wide and use your hand and your board, like Cosmo does that as well or better. Like the only thing that Iris does is allow you to attack with your Spectra auras, but with the way we build a deck, we're not playing those anyways. So
yeah.
All right.
I mean, it's the main play pattern difference with between Cosmo and like Iris or Refractor is that like the latter two are way more defensive. Like you're trying to protect an aura. Um, with Cosmo, you can like play much more of a tempo game, where like if the opponent's being very aggressive, you can like let them clear a board, rebuild, and you get to swing with all those auras. And they only cost one. Um, so it's much more of a value game, where like the difference with Refractor um, and Iris is that like you're playing kind of protect the egg and like you hope to keep a card to swing. Like that wasn't really like what we're trying to do.
Hmm. All right. I mean, I think that makes sense. Cosmo gives you the versatility that the other ones might not have. Going through with the rest of the equipment, I think Tunic makes sense. There's not really much to say on that. We'll go to arms and boots in a second because you guys have quite a few of each in the list. But let's talk about Traverse. So Traverse, at least in the decks that I'm used to playing, I played a lot of Zen. You use it to go off on this pop-off turn, tutors the chi for you. In Enigma, is it more about popping off, or is it more about just like consistency boosting? Why this over something like balance or something like that?
So, I mean, this weapon is obviously very powerful. You can see it in anytime the other decks use as well. Zen, tutoring a free card to have a huge combo turn. Enigma kind of does the same way, right? If you're comparing it to something like Balance of Justice, where you get a 2 block hat that draws a card, balance is conditional and your card is random. This blocks when you want to, draws exactly the card you need, and just
Yeah,
having an extra chi in your hand is so powerful not only for your kind of bursty combo turns with Miragai, obviously, probably the best card in the deck, uh, but just having a lot of consistent options to where um, you might need the chi for more things than you think, uh, which it can come up a lot, to be honest.
Yeah.
And just having an extra card allows you to use your other cards more flexibly because you might have a play pattern that involves keeping a blue to swing or keeping a chi to play something, but your opponent is attacking you. So if you don't have the rest of your cards to block with, your board dies. Well, Traverse cheating in the chi to your hand might allow you to use more cards in your hand to block and then use that chi to do whatever turn you want.
You have a
Nice.
lot of outs for chi in this deck. Um, like I guess a play pattern of like more like intro enigmas is like, okay, I see Miragai block with Traverse, but that's not always correct. Like, I mean, you have the boots, right? So like defensively pitching the chi to block 3 with the boots and make a spectral shield is like sometimes correct. Like cheating in a 10k instant speed after a spectral manifestation is sometimes correct. Like it's very context dependent. Obviously, it's illusionist, right? But yeah, it's not just like, okay, see Miragai block with Traverse. Like there's a lot of outs. Like even sometimes you might need an extra blue to like really solidify your pressure. That also might be correct. Like there's a lot of different ways you can play it, and I think it's not might not be as busted in Enigma as in Zen, but it is very strong and like allows a lot of flexible play and like either helps you keep pressure or like restart tempo, etc. Like there's a lot of different ways you can use it.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially when you explain it as like balance or crown. You're like replacing a card with a card, or you're drawing a random card. This one gives you what you need. I think that makes a lot of sense. It's very easy to digest that way.
Hmm.
But when we look at the rest of the equipment now, we have in the boot slot, at least for main board, Meridian Pathway. And if we like, do a little bit of a cheat and look ahead to the sideboard here, we have Footsteps and Stilettos as two other boot pieces. We don't have Mage Masters in this list. Those are the three we have. So why Meridian Pathway main board? What are those two sideboard boot pieces for, and why did we maybe exclude some other popular options like Mage Masters?
So this list plays 10,000 Year Reunion, talking about Mage Master boots, and that would be kind of the obvious thing to do with it. I tried doing that a lot because Mage Master boots is a little more consistent when you have the 10,000 Year Reunion to be able to attack with it, where Meridian Pathway is more resource intensive and you need the specific chi. The problem I was having with Mage Master boots is that if you don't exactly have the 10k play lined up, then you just never use your boots,
Yep.
and that happens a lot, to be honest. So Mage Master boots just didn't quite make the cut. We're not playing the Spectral Auras, so you didn't have the opportunity to like high roll, play two of them in one turn, and Meridian Pathway is just really solid. The first half of the text is mostly irrelevant except for 10k. We're not playing the Spectral Auras, so we don't have as many ways to high roll with it. But blocking three at
Yeah.
kind of instant speed is very, very powerful. A lot of your pivotal power turns with playing a mirror guy, blocking with your traverse, kind of involves using this card in combination with those setup lines on your opponent's turn to block an extra full card's worth of value. Especially against a card without go again, like maybe a brute is like ending their turn on a CNC, and then you use traverse and meridian to play a mirror guy, you block it out, and you go to your turn with the mirror guy up, and you attack or whatever. And then you also have 10,000 Year Reunion as another traverse combo outlet. It doesn't always have to be mirror guy. If you have the 10,000 Year manifestation set up, you could just block with your traverse. Hit this, turn the extra chi into an action point that lets you swing for 10.
Yep.
But it's just very flexible. It's very powerful. Illusionist equipment historically doesn't block very well, so having one that blocks well and also is flexibly and when you need it is this. It's really good.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things like to add to this is just like it's a reactionary block as well.
Hmm.
Like into like reaction or like evasive damage type decks. Like the fact that you can just turn it on if you need it, or you know don't have to turn it on, um, is like very good. It's also like ward on your turn if you're pitching to Mare guy or like against stuff like Riptide or against stuff like KO with his reckless, like you can kind of protect your auras as well. And it's like, okay, maybe it doesn't block 3 on your turn, but it is still very valid, and like to protect your auras is major value. Um, and Mage Masters isn't here because like 10k in and of itself is like kind of a brick card if don't you don't find it in the right hands. And so like with MMBs you'd need 3 10ks to like really make it worthwhile. And it's like it doesn't really fit your cost curve. Like use Spectral Manifestation 10k instant speed off of blue and chi with pathway, but with MMBs you're like paying 1 to gain an action point basically, and then you have tunic up to swing 10k or something. Like it just doesn't really work well. And like I think it's more like it's a little cheesy in a way.
Yeah, that makes
Okay.
sense. I was just curious, like, because we see a lot of people on the Mage Master, why we think this one's better. I think you explained it very well. Looking at the other ones, unless there's anything else people want to say on Pathway before we go to the sideboard options.
No, I think that
Did
about covers it.
All right. Looking at the other ones, we have Stilettos. I assume Stilettos is just like the AB piece. Doesn't seem like the other text is probably all that relevant.
No, it's just fancier looking null rune boots.
Yeah.
It's for Kano. There is like it's kind of interesting with the equipment suite in Enigma how you decide what AB pieces you want,
yeah,
because what AB3 you pick determines what other equipment you get to play into Kano,
yeah,
and that could have some different gameplay implications depending on which one you choose. It also gives you the option of picking different AB pieces for decks where you only need AB1, like Rune Blades or other illusionists, where historically, with Prism, the hat, the boots, and the gloves were always so important that null rune gloves was the default. But there was a time when we like considered, oh well, maybe the gloves are more important than the boots here. We don't have to have footsteps, so you could consider something like silent stilettos or whatever. But I think we ended up just playing null rune gloves anyways. But
yeah.
yeah, silent
Yeah,
stilettos for KO. Kano.
Yeah.
It's the more affordable cold foil.
Yeah,
True,
flexible.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, and then I guess the last boot piece here we have Footsteps. Is this just for like aggro matchups, or is that still like Meridian is better there? What matchup specifically do you think Footsteps is better?
Yeah, so we play it into aggro decks where the blocking is relevant in one way or the other. So mech, it's kind of useful to have boots that block T-bone because if you play Meridian, you are super vulnerable to those item hate cards because you might not be playing gloves that block. Meridian can't be blocked with on the combat chain. So one T-bone would just immediately snipe your tunic, and a second T-bone just kills your traverse. And if they do that before you get to transcend, like it's so much value for them. So having one extra layer of defense against T-bone, like in of itself, makes footsteps very good for mech. It's also good against dash pistol. And then we also play it into like ninjas. We're playing dense blue mist, so there are times when your tunic might not be up, and you need to play a dense blue mist. Maybe you know that their turn is going to be extra wide, and if you pitch a whole blue for dense blue mist, you're losing a bit of value there. So at least the footsteps you can kind of recur that a little bit. I know we're not playing Stonewall Gauntlet currently, but
Yep.
if that was in your list, it's kind of a nice little combo: Dense Blue Mist, Stonewall Gauntlet, and Footsteps, where you kind of force them to block or to close their chain mid-turn with Gauntlet, which would reset your Footsteps. It's just cheeky stuff like that. The more you pitch on your opponent's turn to block, the better Footsteps are. Um, but a lot
Yeah.
of times you're not doing that.
Yeah, that's
This
fair.
works also very well. Like in previous lists, we were considering like with Winning Vengeance, like you get to pitch a blue to Dense Blue Mist and Footsteps, um, and Winning Vengeance to like hit breakpoints into Zen and stuff. And we often found out we had one floating in that type of list, so like Footsteps just like worked well. And we figured out, okay, when we get Winning Vengeance, yeah, Footsteps still works well.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
It's a solid card. The
yeah.
Phantasm text isn't really relevant. This list isn't really playing Phantasm, um, but it
Or at
is
least people
it is
don't
good.
really bring poppers into us.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you said you weren't on Gauntlet for Zen. There's a bit of a weird arm piece here in the sideboard that is for Zen. So, why don't you take me through why you guys are on Waves of Aquamarine? Because most people are going to look at this and be like, okay, why aren't we just playing the +1 counter boots? What is the +1 specifically for?
I think for this you need to go through the whole story, Aaron.
Yeah, so Uphold Tradition is a very powerful card, but against Zen, like, the value from Ward is pretty hard to get, and that matchup, you either need to be able to block like crazy with your Dense Blue Mist, and or you need to kill them, and you need to disrupt them enough so that they don't kill you, and Uphold Tradition just wasn't really getting the job done there. I was playing a bit with Stonewall Gauntlet, you know, like I said previously, with the Dense Blue Mist stuff to kind of just buy you more time. But I felt that even doing that, if they found a good turn, you just died. And it was really annoying when you like throw a CNC or an Amnesia and they have exactly 6 armor and they just block it. So what I started doing was I was starting to play Goliath Gauntlet, which allowed you to be a bit more aggressive. I didn't care about defending my ward nearly as much. And on a turn in which I thought it would be extra pivotal to have that disruption, I would throw my Goliath Gauntlet on Amnesia or CNC. And the strategy actually worked out pretty well. I was really a fan of Goliath Gauntlet. And then Pierre messages me one night and he just sends me a picture of Waves of Aquamarine. And he's just like, I'm cooking, bro. Like, just like read this card. And I'm like, okay. All right. So I read the card and like all the thoughts just like start going in my head. I'm like, okay, it's cloaked. It's an arm piece. Everyone knows that Enigma plays Uphold Tradition. So number one, they assume it's Uphold Tradition. Number two, this is like an attack reaction that costs 1. What are you doing when you play CNC? You pitch a blue, you pay 2, you have 1 floating. Yep. What do they do when you attack with your Amnesia? Well, they put their stupid 6 fridge on it, and then they kill you with Traverse and 6 cards in their hand. So what do? Oh, well, you use that extra floating resource, and you get over by 1 whenever you find it to be the best to do that. And I was like, Pierre, you might be a genius. This is hilarious.
that I think that was the most clever like find we had on this deck, because like we had an issue with Goliath Gauntlet where like it was very proactive, like you were kind of like investing in your future attack to be meaningful, basically. But with Waves, like it fits like Aaron explained, like it's cloaked, so like they don't necessarily know, like you have the surprise factor. The play pattern for Zen is often like, okay, like this is my go off turn, I'll just like give you all 3 of my 2 block equipments and like go off. So like you juice them with this, and it's reactive, right? So like depending on how Zen blocks your CNC or your Amnesia, like you can choose whether to use it or not. So it's like it was actually like really strong. Obviously now like the secret's like
Yeah.
not a secret anymore, but we kind of theorized with Aaron like, okay, like if they know you have it like in top 8, like does it actually matter? Like they still have to play around it on every CNC or Amnesia you send. So yeah, it was a actually cool tech, and I'm glad Aaron and I like actually registered it.
Well, that was
Yeah,
going to be my
very fun.
follow-up question was like, do you think that now that it's like out in the open and people know that this is like a thing you can be doing, do you think it's better or worse than Goliath Gauntlet now? Like if you were going to run back the tournaments this coming weekend?
I would probably still play it. I still think it's solid. Like Pierre said, if they know about it, it kind of gives you breaking scales or like fisticuff prism vibes where you're just forcing your opponent to block 7 for the entire game. I think the one downside about them knowing about it is that on the the super important turn, they do have that one boots block that
Yep.
a lot of times, like before, they would just use it when it's good or when they have their first Art of War, and then they would save their 6 armor for their combo turn. But if they kind of know you're playing Waves of Aquamarine, they'll just not greed their boots and they'll just block 7 armor on the Amnesia that's like really important, and then
Yep.
you might just die.
But we are talking about ninja players, like the most
Yeah.
impatient type of players. So maybe
That's
not.
true.
Yeah, you know, I always say the saying that the best ninja players don't play ninja. It's
Yeah.
like,
What a quote! What a quote!
anyway, okay, so I think that takes us through all of our equipment. Obviously, we still have the other two ABs here. We're on AB3 for Kano.
Yep.
That's like really important, right? Because he snipes your action points.
Well, he plays Winning Moon, so
Yeah, yeah,
like
exactly.
you have to be able to cover that to protect auras.
Yeah. All right. So that takes us through the equipment suite. So let's start going through the main board here. Starting off, we've got like staple attacks. We've got CNC, Metamorph. Talking about Metamorph specifically, how often do you guys think you actually like are playing for the Metamorph text, or how often is it just like 1 for 7 big number?
I think the Metamorph text is probably the most relevant against Brute, where you need to get their life total down and pressure them in some way, where the rate on this is very powerful. So it's still good to play into them for similar reason why it would be good into something like Ninja that can't pop it. But you get that added fear factor for them where if they pop it, it could end up being worse than
Yeah.
if they just took it. Especially with our deck that's playing a bit more of the ward cards, it could be very punishing for them. Most of the time, when you throw this against a KO, they're just gonna give you some armor, or they're just gonna take it, and that's exactly what you want. Like 1 for 7, like pseudo no phantasm is pretty good.
Yeah, no, that sounds pretty good. Like, you played it in Dromai for like the exact same reason. It was just like big number attack. Love to see it.
Yeah,
Looking.
Dromaya has even less auras, right?
Yeah, no, it was just good rate. Speaking of like good rate, you guys aren't on E Strike, which is like similar rate. Is this just like taking that slot?
Um, so E-Strike is a fine card. It's very mid a lot of the times, but it's always mid, which is kind of the appeal to it, right? Like
Hmm.
it's never like the worst thing ever, uh, but it's very rarely like exactly what you need. So I wouldn't really compare it to Metamorph because Metamorph is just so above rate, where E-Strike is just fine rate. I would say the closest comparison to E-Strike that we have is definitely Standing Order
Yeah.
in the sideboard, which is a card that I didn't see a lot of other people playing. It's very similar to E-Strike in where it's mostly just always mid, and it's very flexible. It's just flexible, slanted a little bit more in the ways that I wanted it to be. Where E-Strike is a bit more aggressively oriented with the ability to extend your hand with the go again. Standing Order allows you to extend your blocks by filtering out either a dead arsenal or something that can't be blocked with on the turn where blocking might be very important. So the +2 defense text from your arsenal can be very important when you're trying to protect a really powerful ward. It was also good with like Dissolve Reality Ponders, and
Yeah.
even as an aggressive card, just like a 0 for 4 Chain Ender or like a 0 for 4 1 card play ended up being kind of nice to have in a lot of situations.
It's like the list is actually very flexible. Um, but we wanted it to be like defensively flexible with stuff like our sinks, etc. And so like I'm a big proponent of E-Strike of like E-Strike being way too popular in decks and generally decks that run E-Strike like Identity, I think. Um, and I think like this is a list that has a lot of identity and um, it just didn't fit in like our play patterns that we wanted.
All right. Well, when you're talking about defensive flexibility, you kind of like beat me to it a little bit when you mentioned it earlier. But you guys are on blue sync, which I found pretty interesting. Because like when I see a lot of like the blue zeros that people are playing for like enabling Enigma, I see like Spectral Prowler and like these other like blue 0 for 2s, but hey, it's good enough. But usually it's the like the aggressive ones, right? It's not really the defensive options. What made you guys like land on blue sync specifically?
I mean, to be honest, yeah, the story was like literally the first night we connected with Aaron. We were like building a brainstorm list, and like as I was scrolling through February, I saw like, oh, red sinks obviously, and then like I saw the blue sinks. I was like, wait, hold on a second, and like we talked for like 15 minutes about like how this card could be mega juice, and yeah, it just like I'll let Aaron explain like how the play patterns shake out, but it just fits. You like you want to transcend defensively, I think, with this list, like just having full knowledge of your hand, and oftentimes you don't want an extra chi in your hand. So like converting that chi into a real card is like very valuable, and like Enigma bricks a lot. Sometimes like or at least not bricks a lot, but she has hands that like don't do much. So like having a little bit more sinking effect is like very nice. but I'll let Aaron like talk about the play patterns.
Yeah, so with transcending, I have always found that the most optimal way to transcend and get chi in your deck is to do it defensively with these cards. Hold the line, being in the deck as kind of a mainstay because of the heroes in the meta.
Yep.
Even playing that against heroes that don't draw two cards just kind of showed you how powerful it was to block on your opponent's turn and then still be able to transcend your chi. Even though you're, maybe just blocking for two, being able to combine it with your chi cards so that you don't have to play bad blues on your turn, just kept the rate exceptionally high. So I was a fan of the defensive cards for quite a while. I was playing Big Blue Sky for a bit. Uh, it comboed nicely with some other cards that incentivized you to pitch on your opponent's turn. But as I kind of removed some of those, the effect on Big Blue Sky to be able to block three or four just kind of wasn't as relevant. So when we looked at Blue Sink Below, it kind of did everything that you want your Blue D-React to do defensively, but it has that other benefit, like Pierre said, of fixing hands and being able to filter out the chi. Because a lot of times, like, you want to transcend to either get the chi in your deck, or you just don't want this like transcend card still hanging around. But you don't always have a good use for chi, and just like pitching chi to like make a shield and not doing anything with it is not really that good.
Yeah.
So Sink Below allows you to kind of do what you do with Rising Sun when you're double transcending, where you just play the Sink Below and then hold priority, transcend, and then you can sink the chi for a real card if you don't want the chi for anything, either to block with or looking for a red or something to do. It's just been very flexible, very in line with what the deck is trying to do. And even though it's a blue D react, like the rate on it is just totally fine with the other things you're doing. And I found that playing two blue sinks plus the three hold the line was a really good number for that.
Yeah. And just one note is like one of the juiciest plays you can do with this is like you like sink your chi and then you grab it back with your traverse and you're like actually just like one turn faster. It's like it sounds like not necessarily great, but I've found that like just being one turn faster, like especially if you're delayed on like your chi creation, is like very valuable. Um, like if you have a Mare Guide in hand or a 10k or something, like it just makes your hand like it fixes your hand, and it makes you one turn faster with your traverse. So like I mean, it's like it's very valuable I think to the list. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. So, going through, talked about the blue sinks. Spectral manifestations you guys only have in red. I don't know if people are really playing this in blue in CC. I just know that this is like played in every color in draft. Do you think it's just like not quite good enough in the other colors, or is that like a hard cut?
Uh, yeah, if it was a three block, I'd probably play the blue, but it being a two block kind of adds a little bit of mm,
Yeah.
Hmm.
roughness to that. The three counters is really important because it lets you play your 10k off of just this card, and if like the card is not that insane to where you'd want to play the yellow, obviously.
Hmm.
This card is pretty contentious. Some people hate it, some people really, really like it. Uh, you basically can only play it in a list that's not playing Spectras, or else it just becomes a brick
Yeah.
way too often. Even in this list specifically, this card can be kind of a brick. Um, but so can 10k, right? But we're kind of playing to the high roll a bit with cards like this. If you like some of the other lists where it's cutting all of these cards, you're not playing Coalescence, you're not playing Waxing Spectre, like you're just doing nothing but blocking and playing Mirror Guy and like maybe attacking with Phantasm attacks. I feel like you're just making the deck like Guardian with like a super Anathos, which I mean it's not bad to be honest. Like super Anathos, like 1 for 8 Anathos is pretty good, and just block every turn. But there are some games in which that's not good enough, and there are some heroes in which that's not good enough. And I just kind of wanted to lean into the polarization of Illusionist by playing cards like Spectral Manifestation, because when this card does line up, it's so crazy. And I'm willing to accept the awkward red 2 block in some situations to get that ceiling.
Yeah, we discussed like even not having it as a 3 of, I think, at one point, and like we were just like it's too good. Like the thing is, right, is like when you have a board, you like kind of wish it wasn't a red 2 block, but then also like when you have to let your board go, like it's such a good piece to restart your board. Like in Enigma, there's a whole like +1 counter economy game that you have to like play, and like 10k is a payoff, restless is a payoff, but just also, it's like very valuable to create a spectral shield and using these counters to have a payoff, and just that doing that after letting your board get nuked. And yeah, I think it's just like a high roll card, like Aaron said, that I think you have to have 3 of, or else sometimes you're just not fast enough, and it's a trade-off, right?
Hmm. I guess I'm learning a lot about how Enigma and CC is different than in draft. Then would you say this is like a card you don't want to arsenal then? Like it just winds up like dead and
Oh,
rotting there, or would you say that
no,
this
it's
is like
very
your
good.
recovery piece?
It's a very good arsenal, I think. I mean, it also depends on like the state of the game, though,
Sure.
right? Like,
I
I
mean,
don't
I'll
know
just
how
say
Aaron
like
feels.
if you arsenal it and you find that you can never play it from your arsenal, you've already won, right?
That
Yeah,
Because
that's
that
probably
means
true.
that
Yeah,
your
actually.
board's never dying. But
exactly.
but like the most mid thing the card does, other than be a red 2 block that you can't play, is you play a shield, you attack for 4, you do nothing, and then they attack you, and then your shield dies, right? Then you're playing your red 2 card 5, right? Like you attack for 4 and you blocked 1, and obviously that's super mid. So this card combos with other cards in the deck,
Yep.
and when you put it in Arsenal, it's really good to wait for the other pieces that it synergizes with this.
Yep.
Because if you just like throw it out, like, oh, my board's empty, I'll just throw it out, and you get like the 2 card 5, yeah, it feels kind of bad, right? If you draw it with the combo cards, it's crazy good.
Hmm.
So you might as well arsenal it, or at least try to play towards patterns in which you can land this in your arsenal. Because then, if you draw your 10k or you draw your Restless Coalescence, all of a sudden the card becomes crazy. Like everyone saw, Noah Clark's Montreal deck where he just drew Spectral and Coalescence together in every game, and he just like steamrolled people with insane value, right?
Yeah.
So like playing to those play patterns, kind of gives you that high roll potential that you need.
All right.
It's also like it's like very niche, but I had a game into Anthony Pham, like a very very good Riptide player, and like I just had a 10k set and like was using it like to just like hammer him without activating any traps. And like I realized, oh dang it, like I don't have any, like if he has a crew trap right now, like he just snipes my 10k. So like actually just using it to make a spectral shield here like was actually not bad. But obviously it's like mega niche. Um, but in general it's like it can be flexible. But it depends on the context, obviously.
And you got to remember when you're playing Illusionist that you're playing a deck that half your deck doesn't block, half the deck doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
Prisms like this, like every Illusionist is always like that. You're going to have cards that sometimes you draw them and sometimes they're really clunky. I
Yeah.
mean, you can look at I think my top 8 game against the Prism, where like I had a huge board set up really early. I drew like 2 spectral manifestations or something like when I had that huge board, and they don't do anything. And then I like cast one for 2 mana to make a shield. Like that is really really bad. But also I've seen and I've done playing as Prism where I just like hard cast a Figment of Rebirth because it's the only thing my hand does. So like you have these insane ceilings at the cost of having like the clunker hands, and
Yeah.
you just gotta temper your expectations on cards and realize like what the potential is, what's worth uh, taking the risk for, and then once you find like the play patterns that are good and will win you games, like just try and make those happen as much as possible. I do think this card is falls into the category of it being worth to try and make happen.
It's
Sure.
a synergy piece, and I think Illusionist in general is like a synergy deck. But being a synergy, like fully syner- synergistic deck, is it will give you, like Aaron said, like bad hands because like you just draw the wrong pieces of like your game plan, like in the wrong order or like stuff like that, and It's like not always great, but like it's the floor is pretty bad, but it's still like a 2 block. Like it's fine, and
Right.
you can
It's
sink it.
like
We
when
have
you
five
were
sinks, right? Like
yeah, it's like when you were playing Dromai before Seekers came out, and you would draw like an all dragon hand going first. You'd be like, well, what am I gonna do? Not go first? You know, it's like risk you're willing to take.
yeah,
All
Yeah,
right.
it's like Runeblade. Like everyone's
Yeah.
played against a Viscerai who goes like Mordred, Revel, you die, and then all of a sudden Viscerai draws 4 non-attack actions, and they're just the worst deck in the game.
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
you pay the price for having the insane ceiling, unless you're Zen, I guess. Then there's no price.
It's also like
But
the floor is like it's actually not that low because oftentimes you already have board. So like if the card doesn't do anything on your turn, it's like Aaron said, it's just like you're winning. You kept some pieces on your board, and so like you get to swing and maybe Arsenal's manifestation and stuff like that. So it's like the floor is actually like not terrible. You just kind of have to like you don't play on this current turn cycle. You like invest in Arsenal and like wait to see what your opponent brings next turn, etc.
like at least it blocks 2, right? Like this could have
Yeah,
just been
yeah,
like a
yeah,
red. It could have been a red instant, and then like
yeah,
you just get
yeah.
screwed.
Yeah.
It's not haste shelter, right? Like,
God damn. Don't get me
Yeah.
started on Haze Shelter, man.
yeah.
Alright. Okay, so speaking of instants that we are playing that aren't named Haze Shelter, we're playing Wax Inspector. Alright, is this just like 3 for 7? Or is there like some other use case?
This is the E strike of the deck.
Yeah.
So, like talking, I was just talking about how worth it manifestations is to play to its ceiling and you ignore its floor. Like this is like the mid card, where it's like it's not just 3 for 7. Like it does have times in which it's way better than that, which is why I ended up playing it. We wanted to play towards snowballing the board. This card is good to cast on rate, and if it sticks around, it's just even better. And usually, attacking for 4, blocking for 3, I would rather do than just like attacking for 7. The 3 block helps in a lot of matchups like Brood or Prism or something, who are they're not just throwing a bunch of ones at you, but they are pressuring a lot of damage. So this is basically like a card's worth of value on defense, and having multiple cards to block on defense can help you protect like your real auras. So this card is good, or it was good. It snowballs fairly well. That's kind of why we were playing it. I will say that the floor on this is pretty low.
Yeah, it's
This doesn't block. It
yeah.
costs 2. If you draw this at a pivotal moment when you need to block, or maybe only have like 1 red and you draw 2 of these, it's pretty bad. Like,
That's exactly what happened to me in
yeah,
my Enigma mirror. Round 1
yeah,
against Cody Williams. I just had dominating board, and I draw like waxing, spectral manifestation, and coalescence. I'm like,
Oof.
oh, like shit, this doesn't do anything, and I just lose. Like I can't block, I can't even play the waxing. It's just so bad, and like it's a card that like it went in the right time. It's just so juice, and like the +1 counters can matter with like restless and stuff. But like you draw 2 and you just want to like DC basically. It's just so bad. Like just disconnect from reality. It's
yeah. It's the kind of hands where you're playing on Talishar and you're like, I'll just close the window.
yeah, exactly.
That won't happen in a real game.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
and it happened
but
round
yeah,
one.
it's pretty well. Like it helped. It definitely helped me out in situations where other cards wouldn't have, but it also put me in really tricky binds that other cards wouldn't have. So this is definitely on my list of very suspicious cards that it didn't really process in my brain that this was like a cuttable card because it just sounds like it's so good, and you kind of just think that, oh, you want to play Wards and Enigma and this is like the best one, right? Like this is way better than Haze Shelter or Waxing or Waning Vengeance. But after like seeing so many other of the Enigmas at Nationals not playing it, I just kind of thought to myself like, maybe I could have not been playing this card. But it's still good.
Yeah,
I don't fault anyone for playing it, and I'm not like hard saying I'm not gonna play it. But I do think like maybe trimming copies of it, or trimming copies in matchups, or considering playing something else is definitely viable.
I think it's not a mainstay 3 of
Yeah,
is like
it's
what I
okay.
would say, because it's like I cut it against Riptide, because like it's bad into Riptide, and like some matchups I just don't even have 3 of. I just cut 1 because I don't want to ever see 2. It's just like those types of cards where you're starting to like trim just one copy is like, okay, that's suspicious. Like maybe I need to reevaluate, like Aaron is saying.
Yeah.
All right. And that appears to be it for the main deck reds. So I mean, I guess you only have 55 lists as main, but like 15 reds in main. How many reds do you think you actually like go up to when you're boarding on average?
20-ish.
20ish. So you say you're like just putting in 5 reds applicable to matchup. You'd say.
Generally, that's how we build
Generally.
the sideboard. Is like 55 main, and then you have like packages of fives that you kind of put in, and that actually worked out pretty well. Um,
It
like
changes a
20-ish
little bit
reds.
when we bring in some of the sideboard blues, or
Yeah.
like in some matchups where we go down in blues from the main board, because we're not always playing the exact same number of blues. I think like sometimes we cut down to like 31 or 32, and that's usually because there's just more reds that are good into the matchup that we don't want to leave out, or there are some blues that would be like detrimental to the matchup. So, like the actual matchup configurations make sense when you think of, okay, these are the 60 cards that are good into the matchup, and then here are the, whatever cards that are bad or that stay in the sideboard. But when you just look at the list holistically, 55 main sideboard, it's like it's not super intuitive, I will admit.
Sure. I mean, I guess part of it too. It's not like you're playing like 15 reds, 45 blues. You're also playing like some yellows. Like we have like dissolve here,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is obviously just
There's-
like a card you would expect to be like power level of a red, but it's just yellow for some reason.
I wish it was blue.
Yeah,
I
if it was blue, it'd
did,
be so
if
juiced.
this thing was red, it would have been played in Dromai like snap
Yeah.
just like that though. Like I guess that's why it's yellow, is that
They made
it
it
makes
yellow
no
on
one happy.
purpose. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's like it's a yellow, so Prism, like it's Prism's color, but it's not a light card, so it's like it's just slightly not good enough for anyone.
It's a little bit
But
sus.
it's
Yeah.
good enough in here apparently.
Oh yeah, the card is crazy good.
The card is good, yeah.
Mm.
You play for the effect, not the color.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
no, when somebody explained to me that like this thing you don't have to have an arsenal sunk to get the ponder, I was like, wait, that was true the whole time?
Yeah.
Why are we just now playing it? I didn't realize that this card said that the whole time. I feel like this card was probably good for a while and people just like never used it.
yeah, it
Uh,
was just about like where it fit in, and like it's really good in Enigma specifically because your opponent needs to keep as many offensive resources as possible to pressure what you're establishing. If
yep.
decks cannot use their full hand offensively, you just block and then snowball your board, and they can't overcome it. And every time you play a new board piece, it gets harder for them to crack through. Dissolve Reality forces them off of large hands while replacing itself as a card. And most decks, they arsenal their good cards, right? Like Brutes are going to arsenal their Blood Rush Bellows and their Wild Rides. Mechs are going to arsenal their Max Velocities. Ninjas arsenal their starters. Like whatever the case is, usually the arsenal card is obviously something they want to play out, right? So you're very likely to snipe a good card, which in the right circumstances could really stuff their turn. And likewise, a lot of decks might not really appreciate a random draw off the top. Like you could play this against a KO and they draw Wrecker Romp with their Ponder, and then they just, now this actually just said discard a card.
Yeah, it's 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 actually it's also very flexible. Like I don't know how Heron has felt during his games, but for me, I really liked to like especially into more mid-range heroes, like to bait blocks with my board and be like, okay, like maybe he's gonna give me a card um for like value wise, or like it's unusable. Um and then so they have three cards in hand, one in arsenal, and then you play dissolve like after you swung your whole board. It's
Mm.
just like so strong. So now they only have three cards to pressure your board, and you have an arsenal. You have five cards in the board. They only have three essentially, and like using those three cards efficiently and using the ponder efficiently is like not easy. So the card can easily get more value than what's printed on the card itself. Um, like I think we play into most of everything, right? I don't think we ever cut it, Aaron.
No, I don't. I don't believe
Yeah,
there might have been like one matchup where you sided one out for
yeah,
just base reasons, but in general, it's pretty good into every hero
yeah,
because, like I said, pretty much every hero needs to you maximize their offensive potential of their hands to bust through what you're trying to do. And this card is good at stopping all of that. They can't block it, they can't interact with it in any way. It's just your card's gone, right? Unless the card they didn't want, or it's like an instant they can play out. You always kind of catch them. And sequencing, does come up with this card. Like
Yeah,
Pierre
yeah.
was saying, when you have go again attacks, knowing like, do I want to use dissolve first or do I want to use after? Do I want to catch him with it? This card is really good to just put in your arsenal because
Y-
there are times in
Yeah,
which the effect is more or less beneficial.
it's
You know,
very good arsenal.
mhm.
Would you say the
Uh,
deck like ponders well?
in general, and especially with standing order, like that's one also of the big plus of like playing standing order is like your ponders aren't ever really dead.
Hmm.
And like most cards that you draw are like very usable. Like our sideboard's very tight, and I think Aaron did a good job like making sure our sideboard is clean, and like most cards that you draw are like very playable. So I think um,
Yeah, I mean, there
Dissolve
might
is
be
just
some
very good.
clunkers where like you draw like a Warmongers or this rounds on me when you don't want to, but most other cards
Yep.
other than those are good arsenals to great arsenals. And I mean, there are times in which you ponder Warmongers, and I would say if standing order wasn't in the deck, I would heavily consider or just flat out not arsenal that card, and
Correct.
then
Yeah.
you're losing a lot of value. But I've had games where I ponder a Warmongers against some deck where Warmongers has no text, and I know that hey, I still got standing order. I'm an arsenal this,
Yep.
and then I'll draw it. Sometimes on the next turn, sometimes a couple turns down the road, just whenever I see it, I just get the value, right?
No,
Yeah,
I'm
standing
used
order.
to I'm used to standing order being played like when I was playing Tekla, I was playing standing order because all of my arsenals were terrible. So it's like
Yeah.
if I ever
It
IP
makes
myself, I can just do this.
makes the
So
ponder
having a deck that
consistency
with
very good.
standing order that actually arsenals well is like interesting.
Yeah, it
Um,
just makes your ponders like super consistent,
hmm,
and yeah, like Aaron was saying, like dissolve in Arsenal, you play it like at the end of your turn, and you juice your opponent. Like that in and of itself is like enough value. And then if your ponder can get like two value from standing order, that's like very very good.
makes sense. Uh, Going on to other power cards here, we've got Restless as the other yellow in main board. I feel like this one's also self-explanatory. Like you said, people saw the Noah Clark games; those were just absolutely disgusting. What this card can do.
Just a
Um,
high roll engine card basically.
Yeah, it's so good with sacred art, manifestations, like I mean at minimum
Even Mirror
it's
Guy.
like a yellow mirror guy. There's sometimes which you can't save your mirror guy and you just need to cash out like some extra counters, you'll move some over. It's very flexible. Um Card's good. It's and its floor sometimes it doesn't really do anything. Maybe you don't have the counters to really support it, but I mean, an instant speed Ward 2 aura actually isn't really that bad as like a flexible reaction type blocking card.
Yep.
But it's definitely made best use of with like, manifestation combos and sacred art, big boards, and stuff like that. It's just a power card, but it's a synergy card. So we're playing towards those play patterns of combining the best cards in the deck with each other to just build something that your opponent can't beat.
yeah, makes sense. Um, Looking into the blues, I guess let's start with cheese. You guys have one, two, three, four, five, six, seven. One of them is the Sacred Arts. And then for the other ones, you chose Drop in the Ocean and all the ones that are playable with no targets. So I guess why is Drop in the Ocean like the combat trick one? Why this one not like Grains
So
or
good.
Pathwell Travel?
It's so good. So
It's so good.
like I said earlier, the best play patterns to transcend are defensively, right? So this just plays into that even more. So when you combine this with your hold the line with your blue sink below, you just get that extra one value of block, and that one value of block, could be the difference between a breakpoint that threatens an entire card or like an extra ward that's really important. So this one's pretty easy to use. It's not as restrictive as Grains and Pathwell Traveled are with the way our lists are built. Some of the other lists were playing Pathwell Traveled, but they also had like way more blue attacks than we do. Um, and they were looking to, play those play patterns, where ours was more about leveraging the ward and the blocking on your opponent's turn with cards that allow you to transcend, and dropping the ocean is just great for that.
It's also like if you need to play on your turn, like we have some blues that transcend on our turn. Like you can play in a link step after everything is done, and like it's like basically a transcend with no text. But like Aaron was saying, like this is what the list is built to do, like defend this transcend defensively. So dropping the ocean just like works so well with that. It's just like I think it's my favorite transcend card after Rising Sun. I think.
Dude, that's wild. This is like the worst one in every other deck. I think it's not even close.
Yeah, it's super bad in like Zen,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
also
yeah.
like
Yeah.
you're not playing blue sync below in Zen, so
Yeah,
Not
you're a
yet.
little
All
safe.
right.
Yeah.
Hey man, I played yellow in Kasai. We can push it. All right. Is there a reason like you guys specifically chose to be on like 7 chi here? Is there a reason we're like not going up or down? Do you
so
think that's the optimal number?
originally I just threw in every transcend that didn't have a target because I just felt like those being the most flexible was a good place to start. And after just playing the deck enough to see, how often you drew too many or not enough cheese, I kind of felt like I wanted one more, just like number ratio feeling wise. And after discovering like the good play patterns of blocking defensively, like dropping the ocean just ended up being good, and it's also just like one extra chi. So I felt pretty fine with this number. There's gonna be some games where you draw too many or not enough. That's fine, but I think playing the flexible ones plus dropping the ocean worked well for this. I could see trying to fit in path well traveled. If you wanted to change your blue suite up a little bit, and I think having like one extra chi card plays into the high roll a little bit, where you can chi faster and more often than your opponent and win that way. But I don't think it's necessary. I mean, I'm pretty happy with this number, and none of the cheese really screw you over too many times. I think my least favorite chi is Preserve Tradition, because for some reason that card particularly, I always draw it on turn 0
Hey.
every single time, and it's like, oh, all of these free to play ones, right? Well, if you don't have any cards in your graveyard, then that's not quite true, isn't it? So
Dude,
I always seem to draw this on turn 0, and I
The
just have
mid
a
game is very good.
I'll do you one
Like,
better. I had a game in Nats on Zen. This is kind of off topic. Where my opening hand was Preserve Tradition, Passover, and 2 reds. And I was like, I can't play either of these. Jeez, what is this?
Yeah, it's like the card's obviously good. Like the recycling your best card is obviously very relevant. The card's
Yeah.
strong.
it's only
It's just,
action though.
yeah.
It's like
I mean,
Yeah, I
usually most
suppose
of
you
the
have
time
a
I'll
lot
get
of
like
instance that this
50
thing
or
doesn't
more.
target either.
it's really good of like the shuffle one where like you play Stir the Pot, Preserve, and then you get back like a Spectral Manifestation or like a Levels or something like very strong, and then you
Mhm.
like Stir the Pot and shuffle it back in, and then that you also double transcend, so like it's Giga Juice. Like it's actually really good when you're double transcending. I haven't really like. Sometimes it's just like very mid. I think it's like the most conditional one in the deck overall, and yeah, it's like floor and ceiling are like fine.
Do you guys consider the Fable at all? If we're talking about like
I
chi
know Aaron
options.
did. Aaron did, yeah.
Yeah, so I played some games with the Fable. It's actually like a pretty reasonable card. Like it's really good against new. um,
Just turn all
it
the
just
daggers off.
it just turns off their first dagger, and it's really difficult for them to have the resources to like play the second one and still have a useful turn. And it's pretty straightforward to keep it around, right? Like all you have to do is just block every turn, and then pitch something on your turn, and then whenever you want to cash in, you just transcend. So it's like it can be pretty good, but also like Assassin's good to match up for you. So it's like, do you need to play the Fable to be better into them? Like it doesn't really help into the harder matchups that much, like Ninja, the really aggressive decks like Azalea or something. It's just kind of whatever there. I think the most relevant piece of tech that I wanted to do it for was to counteract Prism's library high roll. I find that like Prism was a pretty decent matchup for Enigma, And one of the main things to be scared of is them slam down a really early library and then just explode value. And I did kind of have the thought of, well, I could just play Mistcloak Gully and, have the chance to counteract their high roll. But I, it just didn't end up being as consistent or relevant enough, like in theory, that I felt like it was worth the slot. But if you pull a cold foil in a prize pack at your armory and you really, really want to play it, just know that you're not punting by registering in your deck.
I agree.
It's at least reasonable, if you just like the card.
No,
I
I
think
think my. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I think I convinced Aaron not to run it. I was telling him like, I played a lot of Prism V2, and so I told him, okay, like I think you're kind of hinting by putting in your list, because I don't think like library is actually like the way Prism really wins that matchup personally, and so like I think it was like cute and like it was a good idea. I just to me like on the Prism side, I just don't think I want to like use my turn to set library and like let you develop board and stuff. Like I don't know, it was just a little slow.
No, it's super interesting to me that you guys are talking about going through this entire process about playing a landmark to like negate library, when like 3 months ago the same exact conversation was happening in like Tekla where people were playing like Deathmatch Arena. And it's just like we just see this random landmark to turn off library, and then we all figured out, wait, library doesn't matter.
At least Mistcloak Gully has text, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Deathmatch Arena just doesn't do anything. So.
Yeah. The text matters and like the transcend matters, but like library, like the play pattern with Prism, it doesn't actually always give them a card. Like they have to pitch 2 yellows, and so they're not pitching a blue. So like with popping like a herald, it makes their turn a little worse. And like oftentimes you'll see them pitch 3 yellows. So like you're basically you like if they were playing library, they have a lot more yellows than like a hybrid Prism or like Raptor centered Prism would have. And so because they have more yellows, they're actually just like making back up the fact they're running a bunch of yellows and like no blues. And so it's actually not always +1 int.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, that takes us through all the cheese. So let's talk about some of the cards that enable them a bit. First one here, we have Enigma Chimera, which, looking through, I think, other than levels, is the only blue attack that you guys are running. Why specifically, like, Enigma Chimera, not, like, one of the 3-for-5s with, like, upside that came out in Mistvale?
Value.
It's just, like, higher value on average, you think?
I mean, it's a 2-cost 6 blue.
I mean,
it's so
true.
Good. Like nobody runs like poppers into you, basically.
The 2 costs like play pattern just what already existed in the deck, with your 1 go agains, or you tunic to a 2 cost, whatever that you were already doing with CNC. So having like a blue 3 block that fits into that play pattern that throws 6 damage is, it's pretty good for a titanium bauble. A lot of the other attacks just don't have the rate that this card does, and most of them, they're just used because they have go again. Like the Spectral Prowlers and the Spears of Seriality helped you play multiple things in a turn, but sometimes you just want to be able to play like a good thing on your turn, right? Whereas like Spears, could be like super mid. I really liked Enigma Chimera as, oh well, at least I can attack for 6 with 2 blues, and it comes up pretty well. I think
end the chain with it. Like if you're swinging board, oftentimes it's weird, but oftentimes you have 2 floating, and so like you end your turn with that. And like the bad thing with the go against phantasms is that like you're not really playing footsteps in most matchups. But like okay, if they have like the accidental popper, you just like IP'd essentially. So like Aaron was saying, it fits the play pattern of this list more.
Yeah, that's why I wasn't a fan of like either the blue or the red Spears of Seriality, because if they just accidentally had their CNC like the mirror or an aggro deck or something, you just like blew your whole turn up, and you don't have any backup plans without running footsteps. So for phantasm attacks, with this style of list, I much prefer them as chain enders, so that even if they had it, you didn't also lose multiple other cards worth of whatever you're trying to do. Because if your turn is like okay, I'm gonna play Spears CNC, and then they pop you. You're really sad. Where
Yeah.
at least with this, I can like attack with my ward, throw 6. Oh, they popped it. Okay, cool. But like, that's fine. It didn't waste something else.
Hmm.
But if footsteps is is like your main legs equipment, then um, you can potentially like think about those Goig and Phantasms one in that slot. But I just think Meridian's too good, and we built around it.
Well, I was more thinking like comparing this with other enders, but I guess if you say the 2 cost is important, that makes sense. Because I was thinking like maybe like the 3 for 5 block 3 that like draws or stuff like that came out in Mist, like get the rare slot. But
Yeah,
it, you know,
I
2's
like
important.
a second tenets. I think they are.
Yeah,
Second
yeah, something like
tenant,
that.
People were playing the Go Again one. That card's pretty good actually.
yeah. Hmm.
We just didn't want to play too many attack action blues into new. Um, I don't really like disrespecting favored matchups because that's just a good avenue to punt yourself into a loss that you shouldn't, and then people are going to make fun of you because you lost to an assassin. And
Yeah.
like, while I think you can get away with playing some blue attacks in the new, I just felt that the upside of playing those wasn't better than just having the ability to side them all out. So our new configuration, we're able to side out the levels. We side out the Enigma Chimeras. We don't get God by Codex or News ability. If you want to play more blue attacks, you can, but we just didn't decide to for that reason. So even though they are like some good cards, we decided to play some different Titanium Baubles that had some text into some other matchups.
And like
Still fair.
to Aaron's point, like we didn't disrespect the good matchups. And like in sideboard, we basically have like 2 slots, I think, that are like in that philosophy. We just say, okay, we have these 2 sideboard slots, and like sure, it's for like favorite matchups, but let's make our favorite matchups like very very good and like almost unlosable. And that way, um, like if that security is worth 2 sideboard slots, then like we feel very good about this, right?
No, I think that's totally fair. Um, for looking at other titanium baubles, as you put it, we have Essence of Ancestry Mind, which I actually had
Not
to reread
titanium
because I
bauble,
was
not
like, well,
titanium.
what is this doing here? Is this literally just a titanium bauble? Like, why
It's
this
so
blue
good,
aura specifically?
so good.
I'll let you
Um,
talk about this one.
sure. Yeah, we were testing a bunch of blues, and like yes, like at face value, it's a 3 block blue. So okay, titanium bubble, haha, very funny. But the thing is, um, when you set a board and like you swing with it, and you have no floating, you play this at the end of your turn, and it's a 2 ward that helps you protect your board. So like the situation that I use to explain to other people is like, let's say you just Mare Guide, and then I don't know, Restless or whatever. Uh, so like you have a strong turn, but your opponent's keeping 4 cards or something. Like that War 2, if you play it, might be worth more than the 3 block blue. If you get to keep one of those auras set. Um, like whenever you keep an aura, um, for your next turn cycle, you're winning the value game. And so if Ensis of Ancestry, the like 2 ward, which is relevant, it's like 2 times better than Ward 1. Uh,
True,
it's
actually.
yeah. If you get to set it and it protected your board, right? Then that Ward 2, that 1 card, was worth however much value you get to swing your board with, right? And so it's not always just a blue block 3. Like sure, sometimes you block with it, but if the opponent is ever leaving you space because they're trying to set up, like being able to play it and hopefully keeping some of your board up at the end of their turn is very valuable. But it does brick. It's like a not go again action speed aura, so that's why we have only 2. It's like you don't always want to draw it, and like it's actually a pretty good ponder, I find. Um, but I don't know how Aaron feels about this card.
It's like my favorite art in the set, so I just wanted to play it.
Oh,
Uh,
okay, yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
fair.
that's a
I
good
was like,
explanation.
I was like, can I fit a yellow one in for Prism, play a red one for Brute? You know, like it's just a cool card. No,
Bro.
but it's like as far as 3 block goes, like non-attacks, it just has a good rate, right? Like zero
Yeah, yeah.
cost ward 2. It's play it on turn 0, play it when you just have a random card and an action point. Like I wouldn't say you really shape your turns to try and play it out, but like
Agree.
incidentally, you get to play it out. And I mean, like the main cards we were testing against this to, take its spot were like Ripple Away, and I just personally was not a fan of Ripple Away. I didn't think it did enough for it being another like attack action into the Codex like new type decks, and I just thought that the use cases for this card, even though the ceiling was a little bit lower than Ripple Away, just comes up a lot more often.
Ripple
Ripple
Away
Away
is
has
also
like,
just like a terrible ponder.
yeah, I would much rather ponder this than Ripple Away. Ripple Away is awful.
Ripple Away is like it's a juice card, right? So like it's a card that you use to juice your opponent. But the thing is, like into brutes, for example, if they discard an agile wind up on your end step, it's like, did you actually just like keep a Ripple Away in your hand that you were gonna arsenal to like let them agile wind up and like you know what I'm saying? It's just like the play pattern, just like it's a juice card. Yeah, you're using it to juice your opponent. And
Well,
like in the mirror, like for spectral manifestation, it's very good, but that's very high rolly. And like to make it semi-consistent, you would need to play 3 of them, and then like your consistency of your list is just worse. So like Aaron was saying, I like actively extremely dislike that card, and it just like has so many downsides for just like a juice. Um, and like Essence of Ancestry, like the biggest, I think for me, the biggest summary about this card is it's the value it's worth is however much value it helped you protect on your board. So
yeah,
like it's actually like the ceiling can be pretty incredible. If the ward two matters, and so um, yeah, and it happened to me actually that like I played it into a new, and it was like my turn one, and like I didn't obviously swing with anything, and then just like dagger, and prognosis. I was like, okay, like I just actively mega juice them, and like it also has that high roll potential of like, like if your opponent is playing blue cards actively, it does help with that. So I don't know, you're not trading like it is a juice card, but the ceiling can be high. The floor is like not super low. It's like a good flexible card, I think.
That's fair. It's like a block 3 that you can bank as like a block 2 if need be. Like that makes sense.
Yep, yep.
Continuing on, I think we already talked about hold the line. Just helps you transcend defensively and obviously juices brutes a bit. Levels
And
very strong. Anything specific you want to say on this? I feel like this and Mirror Guy are both cards I can just be like, oh look, this card's in here anyway. Like,
it's very good. It's a transcend enabler. Well, I'm talking about levels, yeah.
yeah, obviously.
It's a transcend enabler. It's like, it's insane if you see multiple of them, because like you get to attack for 3 draw, attack for 3 draw, and like one time I was able to have all 3 modes activated and have 2 of them, and then swing Mirror Guy. I was just like, okay, like this card is just absolutely insane. Um, but sometimes just like off of blue, you like levels Enigma Chimera. Like okay, like I had the 3 card 9 Arsenal last card. It's like fine. It's like very flexible.
I also feel like anytime you have a chi, if people don't know, this is also always 2 modes because you can just play it and before it resolves, you can pitch to Enigma or some other thing with chi, right? Like
Yep.
it's like very rare. I feel like you have 1 mode and on any deck that you're playing this.
Yep.
yeah. I mean, everyone's done the play pattern with it before, where you pitch your blue, you transcend on it, you pitch your chi, and then you pick go again, draw a card, and you kind of just got to transcend for free, and you get 3 damage. Like,
Yeah.
it's very flexible. You can use it as a chain ender. Like, it's good off of Tunic, if you want to transcend that way, and you don't, have another card to pitch yet, or you don't need the card draw or whatever. It's very flexible. It's 3 block. It's like its stat line is very similar to like what E Strike does. It's good. Just make sure you don't play it into new because she'll kill you with it.
It's also a high roll piece, right? Like Aaron mentioned, we built this list with like the high roll potential in mind, and it's like if you get all three modes and you have like a board and stuff, it's like very oppressive. If you just set board, like set mirror guy and then use it to like your hero text, and then you just play levels, all three modes. You're like, oh wow, I'm just absolutely gaming right now. It's like very strong, and can be oppressive when you have board. So it's I think it's very flexible and very good.
Yeah, makes sense. Anything you want to say about Mirror Guy that hasn't already been said? Like,
I think the most important thing that you can say about Mirror Guy that isn't super obvious is you don't want to get baited into what we talked about a little bit earlier with Traverse, where you see Mirror Guy, block with Traverse, play Mirror Guy. Mirror Guy wins you the game almost by itself when you get to attack with it multiple times. But if you just throw Mirror Guy out, your opponent's always ready for you to do that and always like prepared for you to set something that they need to kill. So they're always trying to shape their turns to punch through you as soon as you play it out. So Mirror Guy could be a kind of a timing um, exercise where not only do you want to play it, when you have the chi and when you're able to, get an attack out of it, but also when you think that you're more likely to be able to keep it around for a turn cycle, either because you have a D-react that you're about to slip into your arsenal, because maybe your tunic counter's about to come up to 3 and then you're going to have an extra card in your hand to block with and still be able to attack on your turn. Maybe your opponent is going off of an arsenal because they've just thrown everything at you the previous turn. Like, you really don't want to play Mirror Guy into your opponent's off turn where
Yeah.
they're just setting up something. If the brute player claw discards their agile wind up arsenals and you play Mirror Guy and attack, well, your Mirror Guy's dying. Like, it just is. They have 5 cards and an agility. Like, your Mirror Guy's dying. But if you can combo it with a dissolve reality, or maybe they had a brick turn, or you get to set that D-react, like,
Or a CNC.
yep,
Yeah.
or combo with the CNC where you force cards out of their hand or their arsenal. Like, you want to try and attack with this more than one time, and you'll win most games you do that.
It's like obviously it's like a very large part of like your game plan, but it's not always like I see it, okay, like I go and like play it, right? Or like I block with Traverse because I see Mirror Guy. It's like you have to really think of like when the best time it is to set, and like Aaron, I mean, on his stream games was very good at that, and like it is actually kind of a skill card of like when to properly play it and like hope to keep it, because like Aaron said, like it's 12 value of a chi, and if you get to keep it is 20, and then it's 28, so it's one of your biggest like largest like damage cards. Oftentimes someone will have to take the 8, because like it's either like on one side you have, okay, I take 8 and like try to, or like I could block 8 and like keep it, let them keep it, and on the other you have, okay, like I can't let them have it again, right? Like, so
mhm.
it's oppressive, um but like Aaron said, it's actually skillful to
It
play correctly.
it puts your opponent in panic mode because they know
Yep.
that they have to blow every possible resource at their disposal to kill it.
Yeah.
So there's almost no shot that they're going to be blocking it unless their hand is just totally unfunctional, and then you're almost guaranteed to have the mirror guy stick around.
No, I think it
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense what you're saying because it's like 2 card 12 is obviously like insane value, but it's not gonna like win you the game by itself. You need to like be able to actually capitalize on it more than just that. So no, I think it makes sense that you need to be careful when you're like picking your windows with this and making sure that you have them. Um,
Yeah, I've seen a lot of Enigmas this Nats weekend around me that were like, especially in day one, they saw a mirror guy and they just like insta traverse, and then like, okay, like you have now your mirror guy, your tunic is now close to 3, you don't have like anything to like play off after your mirror guy, like a CNC or like a Clasm or whatever, that's oppressive and like sends damage that's hard to block. Um, it's like it's a very skillful, and it's not just like I see mirror guy, I shove traverse. It's just like see mirror guy, analyze current context. Like most likely, it's going in your arsenal most of the time. Uh, so like Aaron explained it very well.
Hmm. All right. Moving on to the last of the blues here, we have Moon Chakra. I assume this is just like in the same vein as Hold the Line, Blue Sync, just defensive blue option to transcend off of.
Yeah, so it it could be a bit better than the D reacts a lot of the times when you're transcending, and a bit worse when you're not. So, um, this card is pretty good. Being able to block 3 when you're transcending is very powerful. It also combines well ratio wise in the deck with the D reacts, because there's situations in which D reacts themselves are a little clunky against like CNC or Dreadboard decks. And there are times in which prevention effects are more useful or less useful, against like Vambrace or Pick to Pieces, Murkmire, that kind of stuff. So having the combination of Moon Chakras and Blue D Reacts kind of covers all of your bases a bit. The one thing I will say about this card is I definitely think it's better ratio wise as a one of.
Agree.
Moon Chakra can be pretty bad if you draw both at the same time, because when
And
you're
no
not transcending,
transcend.
it's just like Tide Maw. It's like your blue 0 block, 1 block, or whatever, which playing illusionist, you're used to having those crack baubles in your hand that don't block and all they do is pitch, but most of your play patterns you can get around that by pitching for something, or you know doing something like that with it. And then when you just have one, you're kind of fine into that scenario. The problem is when you draw like both of these cards, like both copies in the same hand and no transcend, it's like really bad. So I think one is the correct number, and I found that like the 2 sync, 3 hold the line, 1 blue moon chakra is like a really nice ratio of flexibility and upside with your cheese. But I do like this card. I think it's good. Like
Yeah.
3 block, transcend defensively. It does what you want it to do. It can get over evasive damage like CNC.
Yep.
So you still think 2 blue sync is correct then? What would you say like the replace for this is if it's not like a third blue sync or something similar?
Titanium bobble,
Solid.
like just actual
Good
titanium
option.
bobble.
Yeah.
No, I don't know.
Like the third mind maybe, or like
I
something
don't
like that.
hate third blue sync actually. It just
Yeah. Like
I
I
mean
wouldn't. It doesn't have to be a direct replacement, right? Because
yeah.
the sideboarding is very particular with matchups where you want exactly like 60 useful cards, and you don't want to be playing any bad cards into it. So like just cutting 1 blue moon chakra like throws off your whole board configuration, which is like part of the difficulty of building a concise deck list, is you need to have those ratios correct. So I say cut moon, like 1 moon chakra, just because of a ratio thing, but saying that like there's one card that easily slots in as a replacement is kind of tough. I'd have to think about it, because it could
That's
just
fair.
be like a red card, right?
Mm.
It could be just a blue 3 block. It could be another sync or something that I want to do very a specific task. But
Yeah, it's hard to say like Aaron explained. I do think Sing Below probably goes in that spot, like as like just off the top of my mind, but it's not necessarily correct. Like there's a lot of matchups where we don't play the Sing Belows because like stuff like Dreadbore and it can be a bit clunky. Same thing when you see 2 Sing Belows in your hand, it's like not very good. Um, so yeah, it's tough. And like the number of blues in mainboard and sideboard is currently is like very, very tight because of sideboarding. That's why we have a one of Tidemaw um, in sideboard. So it's difficult. Um, but this card is good. The two of was a bit clunky. It was clunkier at Nats than in testing, I felt, but it was good.
Guess we can just quick finish up the blues. Rage Spectre. I mean, this is just like good value again, right? It's like kind of Chimera esque.
Seven.
It was like 2 card 7.
yeah,
It's
I mean blue
also
3 block.
Yeah, it's also your main way to beat like the loop in Prism. It's the only card that actually cheats an action point into Prism of your traverse. So it is actually like a necessary card to have, even if it wasn't as good as it is. But it is still extremely good. Like it's a blue like 2 card 7. It's crazy.
It's like 2 card 7 that's like mini mirror guy in the sense that if you get to attack with it multiple times, like the value is just crazy, right?
Yeah,
Like if your opponent's not threatening enough, you could just block it out and like, oh, here's my 1 card 6, 1 card 6, tunic 6, and it's like if they can't deal with that, they just get so behind, and then once it's time to go, you just cash in your ward 1, and I don't know, like it does so much for a blue 3 block, like it's crazy.
it's
Putting your
also a
uphold
transcend
counter is
enabler.
really good. Oh yeah.
Doing like 3 card Rage Spectre transcend, make a spectral shield, and now you have like a 3 card uh like 3 cards was insane value. It's like 10 value, and like you have a counter, so obviously like you can get more value than that. It's like yeah, it's very strong. I love this card.
No, I agree. I mean, it's just good value. Like anytime you see it in draft too, it's like snap pick. I imagine it's the same CC. It's just solid. Looking at the last couple blues, we have This Round's on Me and Warmongers. I assume these are just like your meta dependent blue slot, where it's like, okay, Zen's super big, we play Trom. Azalea's big part of the meta, we play Mong, stuff like that.
Yeah, these are like the actual titanium baubles. Warmonger is definitely good enough into Azalea and I guess random rune blades that you definitely want to play it.
Instead, yeah.
Yeah, and This Round's on Me. It's kind of another effect with dense blue mist. Like the this is kind of a hard one because it is good like a dense blue mist in the sense that it kind of tempers their huge turns. However, you have to play this on your turn, right? So you kind of have to guess whether or not it's going to be good value for your opponent. Sometimes like they just draw a card and they just deal more damage than you prevent. Is definitely like a downside to this, but it's also a decent enabler on your turn for transcend. It's it's good. It comes in multiples very well. Like if you play a This Round's on Me, they try and force through their Art of War turn through it, and then you also have a Dense Blue Mist. You can really block like quite a lot of damage with it. So I found it to be pretty solid into the ninjas. Um,
I
Myself,
agree. Yeah. The dense blue mist. I think though personally, I'm a little bit more conservative on this take. I think this runs on me is like Omega Bricky, unless you know for sure either you're drawing into a dense blue mist or you have one in arsenal. Like those are your two use cases where I would play this runs on me and like play towards that. It's never a card that I will like save and take a bunch of damage for, but I'll play it if I know I have a dense blue mist set up. Because like a lot of Zen's attacks are sure some of them are ones, but a lot of them are twos, and like it plays with your ward like very well. And I think very like this. I think this is like very like necessary to think about is like their Shuko, um, like their Shuko activation often will pump something to like 2 or 3, and so being having that for sure being 0 is like massive, so you don't have to really think too much about, okay, here's when I'm gonna like let my ward die because I don't want to get juiced by Shuko and such, so that matters.
I
yeah,
think that
it's
this is like
solid.
also one of those cards that gives you like high roll potential too, right? Like anytime I'm playing like a deck and I'm playing This Rounds on Me, like if it ever winds up in Arsenal like off a Ponder or like turn 0 I stuck it in there or something, you can just wind up with these like really weird like 5 card hands that you just drew off Trom, and you just wind up doing some like really crazy unfair things. Your opponent like has to block with their 5 card hand, and they're just getting juiced from there. So I don't know. I feel like it's just nice in a lot of instances, especially in like the fast meta games.
Yeah, it's like something to do turn 0 too. That's kind of cool. You play it, they draw the card, you attack them, like they're gonna block, I assume, or else they're taking free damage for no reason, and then the card that they drew is irrelevant. then they go to their turn, and you just have this effect out. So,
For what's worth, I agree. I did have a Zen. I did a Tron turn 1, and the Zen or turn 2, and the
just
Zen
took it.
took it, had a 6-card hand, passed back. I was like, oh, I'm probably dead next turn. I set an aura and attack. They take it, give me their fridge. Okay, I'm dead. They dealt like 50 damage. I'm like, okay, cool. This was a
Yeah.
good card to play. Like, I guess.
I think my favorite story with this card is I played against I played it in Dromai against like Phi in like February of last year. I drew 3 of these on turn 0. I just played 3 turn 0, made 3 ash. My opponent has a 7-card hand, just passes back, and then they go to play their turn. It's double Artifor, and they just don't even kill me. Like after passing back after through triple Tron, it's like so funny. I don't know.
Like, they could dry pass and like
Yeah,
basically time walk themselves to then keep the extra card with a value to try and combo you. But hopefully your deck is nice to you, or it's built in a way where you can pressure the Zen enough to where that extra turn of tempo like is relevant, right? Like hopefully you draw your CNCs. If you're playing more aggro cards like your Phantasm attacks and stuff, like if the Zen just gets to pass for no reason and like stall themselves for a whole turn and still kill you, then like I don't know, the deck sucks, I guess.
I also feel like
Zen's
dry
broken.
passing is like kind of hard in the way that Zen is built right now. Because like you have so many enders. Like you wind up with these hands, you can have like 3 enders or something if you're like drawing 7 cards. Like you can't even play all of them anyway.
I mean, sure, but the thing is, like, I think this is true for Zen specifically. Is like if you play Trom and you make them draw into a Harmony, or you make them draw into Art of War, it's like so giga free for them to dry pass and like Harmony can easily be worth like 10, 12 value, and like a very pop off Zen, and like if you make them draw into that card, it's like why not just pass and like okay, Enigma sets like an aura and like attacks with it, and you have armor. It's like okay, like CNC me, I guess I just block 7 because of Aquamarine, and you have
I,
your turn, right?
I
Like
don't
that's
know. I
exactly
feel
what
like
happened to
I
me.
feel like a situation like that though is like are we really like not losing anyway if you're playing Enigma into Zen and their like top card is just the best card in their deck and you're like okay well you're probably just
Correct.
getting
Yeah,
juiced in 2 turns anyway, right? Like I don't
correct.
know.
I'm just scared of like a day 2 Zen, like that's a good player that just like dry passes. I'm like, okay, like I'm dead. Just like show me your hand and like be done with it.
Yeah,
Sure.
like I think bottom line, this card can be very strong. This card
Correct.
can be actively harmful to you, and I think that it is. I would not fault anyone for not playing this, and I am definitely going to be reconsidering its use case compared to other things. I will say that. So it's okay.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
not. It's not as obviously impactful and important as Warmongers is. So
Sorry. All right. Well, getting to the sideboard here. I mean, we've already kind of brushed on the majority of this. We talked about standing order. It's good, especially with Dissolve Reality. Talked about Dense Blue Mist when we talked about Footsteps. We haven't really talked about like these other defensive options in here, like Unmovable Moon Chakra.
Those are the 2 spots I was talking about that like solidify are already good matchups.
So these are just for like new Azalea stuff like that. Just more defensive tools.
Brute's a big one too. Unmovable
Yeah.
is really useful into blocking like their 8s, or something kind of like lets you have 2 sink below, sort of. You turn your blue into a 4 block, and then the movable blocks 4 from Arsenal. It's just very powerful to block some of their more aggressive turns and like keep your auras out. I always like red immovable as a one of, even back in like when I played Guardian, drawing multiple unmovables or staunches or whatever those tall D reacts in the same hand when you're choked on resources. It's just like the worst kind of bricks ever. And
Yeah.
I always like the one of is it's very good, but you want to see it alone, kind of like with the moon chakras and stuff. So I like it. It shores up those matchups a bit. I definitely think that, you know, while Brute being a good matchup is, I still think it could be pretty close. And like if you're not playing these extra defensive cards, it can get kind of spooky. Moonchakra is an interesting one because we were considering playing Oasis for a bit, as a way to, be good against brutes, CNC effects, and it's decent against Kano. But I kind of had the thought that, like, well, Tunic is very good in this deck and has a lot of uses, and Oasis is really bad when you don't have Tunic. And so why not just play Moon Chakra, right? Like, it kind of does the same thing, but it's zero, and and it has upside, right? Like, I did Transcend on this card to block 5, like, and the value's just crazy. It's
It's
super
so good.
flexible. It's super flexible. You throw it in your arsenal. You're scared of nothing. CNC send packing can't hurt you. You get to prevent 3. Like, it's just it's good against Kano. You could be good against the Rangers, who try and stop your D reacts. Like, it's I've been really impressed with the one of chakras at both red and blue.
Yeah, yeah. The red one, in my opinion, is one of the most flexible and interesting cards. Like it does so much. It's also high rolly, and like we said, like we wanted the list to like have that high roll potential. But the floor is still really good. It's a 3 block, quote unquote. Um, but it prevents. So like sure into like a big 2 pieces. We don't play into assassin for that reason. It's bad, but into evasive damage like reactions, dominate, um, cards where we can't play defense reactions like CNC. It's like really strong, and if you get to transcend, it's like a really good arsenal, right? Like you're already transcending defensively all the time, and so if you get to like, okay, I'll sink below blue, transcend. Okay, Moonchakra set. Like now I'm blocking 7, like into brute. That's so good. That's so good, and yeah, it's such a flexible piece of sideboard. I've been really in love with that card personally.
No, I think that makes sense. I also like the thought process of differentiating your defensive profile, because I often feel like anytime I'm playing like these defensive techs, like I'm playing Tekla, I'm playing like anything like this, Azalea still winds up being hard despite you having all these defensive tools, because you just can't get around dominate no matter what you're doing. So like having a lot of prevention effects and then not having too many to play around like assassin and van brace and stuff like that, I think makes a lot of sense. I think it's like really well thought out. Um, Looking at our last two that I don't think we've talked about much, we have Amnesia. So I'm assuming this is just like the ninja tech, right? Because ninja's the hotness. We need some sort of aggressive tool to like disrupt them while we're trying to find something that actually ends the game.
It's relevant to Vince as well. That actually, that's kind of what sold me on this card versus Weakest Link. And I know
And set in
Aaron was
Prism.
like, yeah, and Prism, yeah. That's one thing Aaron was like telling me, and we kind of argued on this. Is like he didn't like Weakest Link, and to me they kind of hit the same hand. Like I didn't quite understand why we wouldn't play Weakest Link, and then I kind of played with Amnesia more, and it's like, okay, do Vincent like they care about rune chant names specifically for Rune Gate, um, also for their like hero power. Um, so it's very good um, into Vincent, into those fringe matchups. It's also good into Ninja. It's also good into Riptide. I'm not gonna explain like Riptide doesn't have names, okay? But we take out Waxing Spectre, and once we started taking out Waxing Spectre, man, it, that matchup changed completely. Like I was so scared of Riptide when we were cooking this list, and Aaron was telling me like I can't believe it's like a bad matchup, and like uh we were even trying like thinking of quelling slippers, because quelling slippers would be like, okay, if they multi-trap me on my turn, I'm like I can keep board. But and then I realized, wait, if we take out Waxing Spectre, like most
But
of those issues go away, and like we play Rage Spectre, we play 10k, you just like have a big hammer, right?
yeah,
And having
you don't have to worry about traps if none of your stuff has go again.
exactly.
So
Exactly. So Amnesia just like takes that spot into Riptide and just blocks 3. And like it mattered. Like in my game against Anthony Fam, like every time I drew Amnesia, I was like, okay, this card doesn't do anything offensively. But like, I get to keep my 10k. So
Like,
okay,
I'm so glad
cool.
this isn't Wax Inspector.
Exactly.
So what you're describing isn't a card that's good into Riptide. What you're describing is a card that isn't actively detrimental into Riptide. Those are two
Correct.
different.
Correct.
But in
But-
this list, it's good into
Yeah.
Riptide.
But like fringe matchups aside or whatever, yes, this
Yeah.
is a ninja card, obviously. A lot of people were playing it. This is like the only form of like guaranteed hard disruption. You
Yeah.
know, CNC is like kind of the next best one, but they could just not have an arsenal, or maybe they don't care about it. This is the one where it's like, okay, you can't do your bonds garbage, you can't chase the tail me, like this can't hit you, and you still have like an insane turn against me. So definitely good. Like Weakest Link, you know, a lot of people are playing Weakest Link. I played too many games of Weakest Link where I throw it and they're like, okay, take it, and then they show me, you know, Descendant Bonds Harmony, whatever, no 0 block, and then they kill me. You know, even with Brute too, it's like I'll throw it and they're like, oh, my hand was, you know, Blood Rush, 3 block, 3 block, 3 block, and you know I have a quicken, like nice 2 for 6, idiot. So Amnesia was like, okay, this is the one that people actually care about, and like you have to disrupt Ninja, or they're just gonna kill you too fast before you can pressure their life total. So hard disruption that's like guaranteed was where we wanted to be, and Amnesia is definitely that. Amnesia paired with CNC, and then to a lesser extent Phantasmaclasm, but
Aquamarine.
it's definitely
That's an
good.
Aquamarine target.
Yeah, it's an insane Aquamarine target.
It's
Yeah,
the best one.
I
Yeah,
agree.
by far.
Like as someone who was playing Zen this weekend, this was always the one that scared me the most. Like CNC, like I'd have so many turns where somebody's CNCing me, and I have like Chi in hand, Chi in arsenal, and I just double transcend on their turn and just completely dodge the arsenal blow up. Or like Weakest Link, you know, half the time you don't have a thing anyway. Like this one's always on. I think this one makes the most sense. Well, one that I kind of disagree with you guys on though is Phantasmaclasm. I think I had this thing played against me twice on the weekend, and both times it actively fixed my hand. I don't know. Like this card seems so hit or miss to me. Like for the same reasons Weakest Link is like kind of hit and miss.
This card would be a lot better if you could choose to not activate its effect. But
Yeah.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
I did Omega Cheese Brian Lorenz with this card, so I can't talk too bad about it. I was able to snipe their only blocking card and leave them with 3 cheese in their hand when they had 2 mirror guys out. So this card could just be the like super gas. Like the rate is so high, it it gives you information at least on what their hand is, which could be relevant, you know, for blocking decisions. It's a big number, and you kind of need big numbers to kill your opponent that's just faster than you. And the disruption, yeah, I mean it's hit or miss, right? Like it could be not impactful to actively detrimental, but it could also be like insane, right? So it was a pretty good filler aggressive card.
Yeah. It's the Ray is also like very good.
Hmm.
2 card 9. It did happen more more than not that I was actually fixing my opponent's hand, which like that felt very bad, especially into Ninja. You just like see their hand and it ended up doing nothing, and then you draw them into a blue or draw them into a like Transcend Enabler or a Chi card, and you're like, okay, like this card just like that was not a 2 for 9, that was more like a 2 for negative value. But I mean, it's like it does the thing. And into I actually think it's very good into Ranger. Um, I didn't get to play into like Azalea this weekend, but it's very good in that matchup. I think. Um, yeah, that's why it's not a 3 of and it's a 2 of. It's like sometimes it's a little awk.
That's fair. All right. And then our last card to really talk about here, I think the only one we haven't touched on is really Phantom Tidemaw. I mean, we've mentioned it here and there, as it's like sometimes awkward to play around because it's a 1 block. What is it actually like here for? Like, what matchup do you think that the stacking effect is like actually
mean,
necessary?
That card, and can talk more about this, but when we were like making sideboard, we made sideboard with like 78 cards, and we had 2 flex spots. One of them ended up being the red chakra, and the other one is this card Tidemaw. And the main reason we wanted the last spot to be a blue is because I think in the mirror it was, and like into Kano we had like one
Yeah.
slot that like we had to put a random red in.
Yeah, it was
Uh,
like the Enigma mirror, like we didn't have
yeah,
60 good cards, so we had like one standing order or something in, and it's like, that just felt a little weird. So I was like, we need like one more card that's like good in the
good.
mirror and like good in the Kano, and like this is like that one of like kind of high rolly card where it's like, you know, this card could just overrun your opponent sometimes.
It's good in
Most
mirror.
most of the time it
Uh,
doesn't, it's kind of
yeah,
whatever, but
it's good in mirror. It is good into anything that doesn't necessarily always threaten your board. I'm thinking of like assassin and all those like already kind of winning matchups, like warriors, etc. But like you're just accumulating counters and then you see restless and you see restless for 13. That has happened to me, and you're just like, your opponent
okay.
just yeah, you just win. That has happened. It's very good to set early game. It's not good to see mid game. But it's a blue and a one of, so you never draw two. Actually, it's also good into Riptide because it's like you can cheese an opponent's like trap activation with it. I didn't get to do this, but it's definitely like a line you can do. Um, no, it's like I think to me it's a very good card that works in the mirror and it's kind of high rolly, but you don't have two or more, so like you never draw two. It's never like awful to play. Um, and it's like a good sideboard card, I think. But I that's one thing I disagree with. Like, let's say Noah Darkordius, his list he's running three. I think. I think that's like absolutely not correct. Like that card, when you draw two in a hand, you're just like, what the heck do I do? It's just so bad. And then when you have it like mainboarded or something like that, like okay, sometimes you get to side it out, but it's not. There's a lot of matchups where it's just like a block one, um, and it doesn't feel right to play this card into most matchups. So it's like perfectly fine as a sideboard and as a one of. The game normally goes slow enough where in the matchups that you play it, you'll see it, and you can, if you do want to, you can play around that card. It's never like, uh, I think once you're playing more than one, the the benefits of that card like drastically lower, in my opinion.
No, that makes sense. But,
I
I mean,
don't know if Aaron
especially
has tried more than one, but
yeah. I think the thing that
Yeah, like it's not that good.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's like the Moonchakra thing. You draw like two of them and they block one, and you're like, okay, I guess my board dies and you can't do anything. Because like the problem with it is like you have this big juicy board that you would love to get a bunch of counters on it, but like your opponent's attacking you to kill this board, so you're not really able to play the Tide Maw and then have everything but the Tide Maw die and
Yeah,
then get all the
exactly.
counters. So usually like you have to give up your board and then establish like the Tide Maw, but like all your stuff died, so you just lost all those counters. Like
It
it's
is a
kind of
Vritz and
awkward.
enabler too, which that
It
matters.
is. Yeah.
But the way you want to play that card, like Aaron said, is like you play on your turn and then more auras. You don't want to ever play defensively because that almost like 99% of cases it doesn't work out. Uh, yeah, it's just it's not. It's a one block. Just look at it that way. If you ever see two in a hand, it's just a one block, and it just doesn't feel correct.
No, I think the thing that like has impressed me the most, like talking through this list with you guys, is that like how fine tuned the sideboard is. Like I really like decks that are like two ofs, one ofs that like make the ratios very very tight and have like deep meaning behind them. And I think you guys did like a really good job with that. Like I'm
A
Yeah.
lot of a lot of that it was Aaron actually. Um, like a lot of the creative cards were like ideas I brought up and then I discussed with Aaron, and then Aaron did a very clean job with sideboarding, and then I always like my main boards to be 55s, so I can side in and out stuff. And 55 or 54 doesn't matter, but lower than 60. And then Aaron liked that idea. I was like, okay, like I think this is gonna work out, like working together, because like you have the same philosophy. and then like he like cooked up that sideboard like so cleanly. It was very very good to see. I loved working with Aaron on this.
Yeah, I think like specifically with Enigma, it kind of exasperates the benefit of having like a bunch of one and two ofs.
Yeah.
In general deck building, it's kind of a marker of you're thinking things out in terms of ratio, not just card power, to have ones and two ofs rather than just a bunch of three ofs. But Enigma specifically, because your cards have very different and very specific functions that you have to consider when they're good, what they're good with, and are they good in multiples. Like the moon chakras, the D reacts are like perfect examples of this, where the effect is very strong, but in multiples or with other cards that have that exact same purpose, end up being very poor. So you need to combine cards. It's kind of like a Runeblade thing. You're mixing your non-attacks and your attacks, or with Azalea, your pumps and your arrows. Like Enigma, you have your blue no blocks that do a very specific thing that you pair with your other cards that block so that you can do that thing comfortably, or these two cards pair together to do this one specific function, but if you have two of one half of it, it's really bad. And that really comes through with Enigma, and why I think that like spicy one ofs is more often than not probably correct. So when you see people playing like one of this, one of that, two of that, it's not because it's not good enough to play more. It's that it's best when you play less.
Like Tidemore, like we just explained,
Yeah.
right? And it's I think it's Aaron is so completely right with this. And like Clasms, like you don't need three of. It doesn't work with what you're trying to do, and it's a synergy deck. So like the more sideboard you have in three ofs, the more you start to hurt the main core of the deck. Um, and like I think Aaron, you said that, but it's like Enigma is a 30 card deck that you're just filling to 80 basically, and it's like like your 30 cards being like manifestation, mirror guy, your chi cards, restless, etc. And then everything else you're trying to make function with your main engine that you're trying to do. And so I think sideboarding, very good sideboarding is key with that. I think that's also why I felt lost. Um, and why we started working together is like I had really really good cards that were working, and I couldn't make it work. Like it just bricked or like things happened, and I think working with Aaron has taught me like I think Aaron is very very good at like fine tuning lists, and like I learned a lot in understanding like why good cards aren't three ofs, and like how to make sideboarding clean and like with purposeful. I think that's one aspect of my deck building that was missing, and I'm still working on. And yeah, it was a very good experience.
All right. Well, I mean, as the Enigma casual here, who's only really played it in draft, I feel like I learned a lot. Do you guys have any like closing remarks you want to say that you don't think we fully covered, or you think we got it?
That sounds about right. I think Enigma is just a ton of fun. I think anyone who's thinking of trying her out, maybe it's a little intimidating to jump into. It plays on a very different axis than other heroes. I hope that this discussion around at least why we picked the cards, helps with understanding what you're trying to do as a core game plan. And even if you might disagree with individual card choices, or you might have a different style that speaks more to you, just knowing the reasons why you play the things that you do can really improve your game, because you have specific play patterns in mind. You have a core like macro gameplay focus, and you execute it to the best of your abilities, rather than just like, oh, I've heard this card's good, let me put it in my deck, and then you draw it and you don't know what to do with it, and then you end up just not succeeding where other players do, who just know what their own plans are. So I think that is important for just in all of Flesh and Blood. But
Yep.
Enigma's great. Zen's scary still, but I think Enigma is reasonable to pretty favored in the most other matchups. So just nuke your whole
Pretty
sideboard
favorite
space
to
to beat Zen, and then you beat everything else.
pretty favorite is like a range from like 60% to 100. Like it's a very wide range.
The
Yeah.
illusionist problem, you know.
Yeah, and yeah, Aaron is completely right. Like this is a deck for people that really enjoy macro and like learning a deck on like a global scale more than like how to play a sequence. And it's very rewarding to play. Uh, it's a deck that requires a lot of reps and like understanding your matchups deeply. Um, as a Kasai player recently, I've really enjoyed playing that that deck. It reminds me of Kasai, where like yes, your lines look very similar, but you're playing your cards very differently in different matchups, um, and your game plan switches a lot between your matchups. Um, so I've been enjoying that part of Enigma a lot, and I think people that enjoy those types of decks will find a lot of joy playing Enigma. Uh, and yeah, try this list. Like if you see any upgrades you want to do, like feel free to ping either of us. We'll put the Twitter or the Discord handle in the description as well as the deck list, and we'll if you guys want to contact either Aaron or I or
Yeah, and I know like the lists that on FabTCG's website is just the pile of 80 cards, and much to the dismay of players when they see a pile
yeah.
of 80 cards, they're like, I don't know what to do with this. So I get messages be like, when do you play this? When do you play that? So the hopefully the deck list that we post, it'll be the version that has all the matchups so that
Yep.
you can kind of see the result of what we've been talking about on like cards coming in and out based off of ratios and how we think it fits in the matchup. So it should be a bit easier to follow along and understand kind of why we made the decisions we did.
I think also this list that we're gonna link has all the matchups that we played at Nats, or at least that we prepared for Nats. I think we had some updates since then, but that we didn't put in the deck list. So we'll I'll see if I can update that. But in the meantime, thanks for coming here, and that was awesome.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, thank you very much. Had a good time. I enjoyed working with you, Pierre.
It was awesome. Yeah, it was very fun. We need more inter-team testing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Uh, that
more the merrier.
was
Always helps.
yeah, yeah. It's also it breaks the echo chamber, but also you're playing two different people's strengths, and I think that was a good. I'm proud of like having worked with someone that I haven't worked with before. I obviously I knew you next local, but yeah, it was. I'm quite proud of this list, and obviously has results through you, and it was it's a beautiful list, I think.
Yeah, I think even if we decide obviously there could be changes to be made, tuning to specific decks and metas, and even if we might have had regrets on certain cards or noticed things that we didn't in the past, like we had the concept in our mind, and even if it wasn't executed perfectly in some scenarios, we at least knew why we were playing those cards and how to play those cards. So even if this isn't the perfect list, I felt comfortable playing it and had a solid game plan into any hero my opponent flipped up. So I think that's about as the best you can ask for at an event, as far as being prepared goes.
Especially 2 weeks after release, right? And
Yeah, yeah, very very new
we we
hero.
we went. I mean, we had a lot of reps on Enigma before, obviously, but we went from basically zero or like a core engine to like this 80 in what 10 days.
Yeah,
Like we
it
did.
was not
I
a very
think we
long
did really
time.
well. Yeah.
now Pierre can finally know how it feels to be me when Pierre goes and wins with all my Kasai decks. So thanks Aaron for giving him that proud dad moment. All
I have.
right.
Yeah. It is a proud that moment. I
Yeah.
wish I was up there with him, but
Yeah, I mean always. For sure. It's
it'd
like a
be like
little
that.
bit bittersweet when you put all this work into a deck, it doesn't work out for you, but it works out for someone else. But it's also like that sense of accomplishment where you're like, yes, I helped make this. It's like always super fun. All
Yeah.
right.
That's great.
Day two
Well,
draft was rough for me,
dude,
but
both
for
days draft were rough
Amsterdam,
for me, man. This is not good.
I'll be well 3-0 day one. I just completely threw day two, for draft. But for Amsterdam, I'll be ready. I'm grinding those runaways drafts, and I'll be putting in a lot of work for drafts. I think that's a hole I need to work on. And
All
then I'll be on Aaron status on Enigma. And
right. All right. Well, I think we can close out here. So thanks again, Aaron, for coming on. Thanks to all the out of the box people for letting you come on and talk with
Yep.
us. Their logos down the bottom, and always check them out as well. Remember, you can use 10% off with code BlueSync when you shop with Tyler Righteous Gaming on TCG Player. Just shoot him a message after you order. He'll take that 10% off for you. And look forward to the next deck tech. Tyler top 8 Battle Hardened on Zen, and I think that'll be our next one coming out. You can look forward to that hopefully in the next week.
Bye bye, everyone.